Hi everyone, I'm Kieran from the In-Group. I lead our change management practice, and today I'm here with Melanie Franklin. Melanie Franklin's doing some amazing things in the world of change. She's the CEO of the Capability for Change. She's a judge on the Change Awards, and she is also the founder of the Change Capability Survey, which she'll be leading this year. I'm really happy to have her here with us today and looking forward to our conversation. Melanie.
Hello.
Why do you do what you do, and what mission are you on in the world of change?
I do what I do because I think that if we are able to manage change, then we take a lot of stress out of the working environment. People are under so much pressure at the moment because they have to do lots of different things differently. So they have to give up what they already know, the safe routines. They have to take a chance that, I'll try a new system, I'll follow a new process. They could make mistakes. So there is that nervousness, that fear, and that level of anxiety across an entire organisation where people are feeling under pressure. We know when people are pressured and stressed that they are more judgmental, that they are less friendly, they find it harder to build relationships, they're less positive, and if they're less positive, they're less creative. But we want people to be creative and innovative. We want people to build great relationships. We don't want people stressed at work. So I think I'm on a mission to try to reduce that stress level by enabling people to cope. When your boss says, we're going to start using this new system, or we're going to restructure the team, or we're developing a new product, I want people to be able to go, yep, okay, I'm up for the challenge, because I know how to cope with that. So I'm all about coping and thriving with change at work.
Okay. And how is that mission going? Like, what are the setbacks at the moment? Are you feeling that companies are seeing that as a problem within their organisations and that is bringing value? Like, how is that value being demonstrated, and what successes have you had so far?
I think the biggest issue, I run the Global Capability for Change survey every year. We're just about to launch the next one in September of 2023. 89% of organisations last year said that they expected there to be even more change. 11% said that they thought they'd have the same level of change in the coming year. Nobody said it was going to get less. And I think that goes to the heart of the biggest issue. If I talk to anybody at any level in the organisation, including the C-suite, we've got far too much to do and not enough time to do it. So I think that ongoing pressure, people just can't fit things in. People start getting anxious about only half doing something before they get moved on to something else. I think the biggest impediment to being able to be effective at work, be successful at work, is fitting things in at the moment. And that includes the time needed to get used to a new way of working. We know that there's always a performance dip whenever we make a change, because people are trying to wrestle with I've got to do that next and then that. They have to think very hard about what they've got to do.
Yeah.
That takes concentration. But if you're already juggling 10, 15 things, you haven't got much concentration left, then it elongates the process. So we're not seeing the results as quickly as we should. The conversations I have in the C-suite are all about how do we use change to realise the benefits. We're paying for a delivery over here. It could be a new system. It could be that we've got a big consultancy in doing a restructure. But we're paying over here and we need to realise the benefits over here. And we're not getting that because people are struggling.
Is that a capability issue? Is that because organisations don't have enough of that capability internally, meaning that people are pressurised to do a lot more than they can actually handle within the world of change?
I think things are shifting. I run the continuous change community on LinkedIn. We're a monthly networking group, and the last 3 years we've always talked about the big challenges in what we're doing, but I think we're starting to see that change professionals, our role is changing. It is not enough anymore to produce a toolkit and say, these are the templates you need if you're running a change, and giving them out to line managers and go, sort yourself out. I think there's something here about, if you're a change professional, you're actually going to have to do knowledge transfer, skills transfer to all of those managers who are leading their teams in the business through change. I think we're starting to see now that the volume of change isn't getting less. The need for being able to cope with change is getting greater, and to have a small change management office that tries to run all of the changes from an organisation. That's impossible. So how do we build up the capacity? Well, we develop the capacity in-house. Now, that isn't to say we can't always bring in contractors and consultants, but we'd never be able to bring in as many external people as we have changes. We just can't do it. So it makes logical sense to build the capability in-house. And I think that's where our role as change professionals is, how can I coach somebody to do what I do naturally? I was in a conversation with a big brand yesterday, which was all about how do we as the central change team, how do we teach people to do what we do automatically? And catching yourself in the moment of, oh, I know how to facilitate a workshop. I've only got 90 minutes. They're senior leaders. Oh, I'll do these activities and I'll make sure they prioritise this before they leave the room. It's all natural stuff to us because we do it every day. But if you happen to be a line manager of a small finance team and you weren't expecting to have to coach people through change, you might not have all of those techniques at your fingertips. And I think it's how do we help people manage through change now? That's going to be I think that's the defining part of my career for the next 10 years, is how do I build that capability?
Amazing. I mean, you're very passionate about what you do and obviously quite a known person within the world and the change community. What is your background? How did you first start into the world of change, to give people a bit of insight to how that world started for you?
Well, I started in investment banking and I started as a business analyst. I didn't do that for very long before I got moved to being a project manager. And then from there, I was moved into being a program manager, managing multiple interdependent projects. It looked pretty scary, taking on a lot of responsibility, but they tripled my salary. So I said, well, why not? Then I became global head of project and program management. And all the way through that, I was working with people at the Cabinet Office who were developing some of the project management approaches, things like Prince 2 and managing successful programs. I think one of my first books was a how to do program management, because I've now written, I think, 10 textbooks. Wow. And I did a how to implement Prince 2 and I did a how to use program management as my first books. But I started to realise, as I was running lots of teams around the world and responsible for budgets of millions of pounds of investment in the delivery of change, the creation of what I always think of as tangible change. We've got something new, but the bit about, well, yeah, but how do we help people use it? How do we coach them to change how they work? That wasn't being looked at. And I started to do more and more in terms of behavioural change. And I was working with the exam board APMG on their change management qualification. And I started to become far more passionate about how do we manage that transition from old way to new ways of working. I was very aggressive in my 20s in terms of building my career. So I got every qualification I could. I did all of the banking qualifications and international finance ones. Then I went off and did a whole load on marketing. And then I did a whole load of qualifications on project and program management, and then on training and development. And because I always felt that being the most qualified person in the room was a tick in the box. It meant that, and I am talking about 20, 30 years ago, where being female and in investment banking wasn't always easy, that they couldn't reject me from a job because I didn't have all the qualifications. So I was always the most qualified in the room. But one of the things I learned, and probably why I'm so passionate about training and development, is that every time I studied something, it opened up new ideas. It triggered new thoughts, new perspectives. I often, through the training, met new and interesting people outside of who I was working with. So I built my network who also inspire me. And that, I think, has continued throughout my career, because even though I train people, I'm the chief examiner for the Agile Change qualifications, I'm the chief examiner for the new Neuroscience for Change qualification, but I still go on training courses myself. I still like to learn and learn with others.
Yeah, I mean, curiosity is one of the drivers, right? And you mentioned your network and people that you've obviously worked with over the years. Is there someone or people that have been a key part to your kind of development and you've seen as a mentor? Do you have mentors? I mean, you're obviously a mentor to many people now, but you must have had your own as well throughout your career.
I do, and I still have two today. And what I look for in a mentor is somebody who has a different perspective as well as a different skill set to me. So my current mentors, one of whom is from a finance background, and I find that I don't enjoy spreadsheets. I don't enjoy the numbers. I'm far more of an ideas person, and he sort of coaches me through things that I think, I need to focus on this a bit more. And also my other mentor, she has a very different working style to me. I tend to be much more big picture, very future focused. And she is far more in the present, how are we doing things today? Yeah. And she's far more into the details, and she likes her information in a very orderly way. And I find working alongside her sometimes sort of just sharpens up how I'm approaching a situation. Okay. So I think mentors are really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, there's a big drive now to everyone to position themselves with a mentor, because obviously it can help you so much in your career. I know it has done for me as well. Going back to the qualifications piece, obviously as a recruiter, we speak to clients all day about, what they're looking for. And obviously change management is one of those areas that not every client exactly knows what they are looking for. They just want somebody who can obviously come in and do the job and deliver effectively. There's never that requirement. Please make sure that person's got the APMG qualification or the ProSci qualification. 2 questions for you. How important do you believe the qualifications are for transformation and change professionals? And also, how would you advise someone like myself to address that with particular people in my network? So giving them insights to why that is important.
I think for me, as somebody who does hire for various teams, for various clients, I have a view that I always look on the LinkedIn profile, when did the person last do training? And it doesn't matter what they were training in, because I think what I'm looking for is the mindset. So if somebody has been on a course in the last 2 to 3 years, I'm thinking, they keep themselves up to date. They must be curious. They're open-minded because they're going to be hearing information from some other sources. If they haven't done any kind of training in the last 5, 10 years, I sense an arrogance. I sense I know everything there is to know. I don't need to be trained. And that attitude would worry me. So I use the evaluation of the most recent training as an indication of the kind of person somebody is. When it comes to incredibly experienced people leading others through change, that's fantastic if they have those natural qualities. But I'm probably only going to find those natural qualities when I interview. If I want to interview somebody and I've got somebody who has studied ProSci or the APMG's change practitioner or agile change or neuroscience for change, if I can see something related to change that they've studied, I'm thinking, well, okay, they know some of the groundwork. So they're more likely to get into my interview pile, if I'm honest, because I'm thinking I don't actually want to hire somebody that we then have to coach ourselves. Yeah. So that's how certifications work for me when I'm looking for people.
Okay. And what would be your advice to somebody like myself or recruiters that are obviously working quite closely with the change management network, how they encourage people to actually take on those courses? Because, of course, we do get individuals that ask us, do you think I should take a course? What kind of courses are people taking? What advice would you have there?
I think that if you are setting yourself up as a change management professional, then do some training. You can't claim to be a professional and you can't claim to be passionate about your industry if you don't ever study it. Yeah. But I also think that the world of change management is changing. Change professionals, if we're going to go much more into coaching others, I think we are going to have to find more answers for ourselves. We can't just do the same old on every single job. I think that's what's driving the passion behind neuroscience for change, because I'm getting so much feedback from people that they are looking for answers that are more scientifically driven. We might be talking to senior leaders, advising them how to communicate change, and being able to say that actually what we're advising you is very brain smart. And I know this because I've studied how the human brain reacts to certain words, certain messages, tones of voice. If you say that you actually know a little bit about what you're advising people to do, your credibility goes up. And to be frank, if you are a credible force, you have to argue less with the people you're working with. You don't have to repeat yourself all the time. They'll go, that person's credible, I'll follow them. So you've made your own life simpler because you can just say what you need to say and people go, yeah, I'm likely to buy into that. This person knows what they're talking about. So I think all of this about personal development is wrapped into being able to do the job more effectively. Because if you're a credible force, then people will listen. And it's our stakeholders who we have to engage. So I'm into anything that's going to help me get my message across more effectively.
It's really interesting, the neuroscience side of things. It's not something that I hear about much, but I've heard a lot of it from yourself and a few individuals in my network. Tell me more about that. Like, what's that movement and how is it making an impact in the world of change? What have you seen as from a positive side of that?
I think what I'm seeing is experienced change professionals are recognising that the arguments that they can make about why they do what they do, based off of theories and models that maybe have been in use 10, 20, 30, 50 years sometimes, are less effective now. I think we've got a far more cynical audience. I think we've got a super smart audience that have grown up on social media, and therefore how we put a change management message across, I think, is changing, and we have to be much more focused about exactly what words am I using, relevant to the culture of the organisation, the perspective of the person that's in front of me. So I think we have to be more laser focused. I certainly find I need to be a lot more surgical in my thinking about exactly what am I choosing to put in front of that stakeholder, how am I choosing to put it in front of them. And certainly from a neuroscience perspective, there is a huge amount of research and a huge amount of ideas about how we can do that in a super smart way. And the demand I'm seeing is not from the business. I'm seeing it from change professionals, experienced change professionals who are saying, we need to tighten up how we do things. And there's been some great work in neuroscience for change. The SCARF model, David Rock's work is phenomenal. Hilary Scarlett has a book on change, organisational change and neuroscience. And these have been out for a number of years, but I'm now starting to see that there's a little bit of a shift to this could be something that could upskill me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you find that everything you've learned within the methodologies you've used over the years and obviously transition into this neuroscience element of change, do you feel it's something that's going to take some time to embed into organisations that clients and stakeholders are going to trust as a solution? Or do you feel it's so natural that it's probably just going to embed itself in as part of that journey?
I think it's not a methodology, it's just a way that we might communicate, a way that we work. Being brain smart, I think, is probably something that, as I said, the really talented people I work with are the ones that are having that conversation at the moment. And it doesn't seem to matter in which country I'm working in or which industry. The super smart people are saying that what they're doing is based more in neuroscience than not. So I don't think it's something that we're going to train hundreds of thousands of people in. I think it's clever people will work out. There's some good ideas coming out of that world, because a lot of what I think in the really clever change people use behavioural science, the School of Positive Psychology and neuroscience, and sometimes they don't even know that that's what they're doing because they've read so many books, they've read articles, and it's sort of seeped into what they're doing. But I think it's all about the world of change management. We are a profession and we need to act professionally. And the quotes I get from people is, I feel more professional when I can quote research, when I can say that this is grounded in science rather than it's grounded in common sense. And I think there's a view that stakeholders are far more pressured with their time. They want messages that connect with them almost immediately. And certainly my own experience has been that when I'm thinking about doing my stakeholder analysis and trying to work out who I'm going to talk to, basing it on job titles, basing it on position in a company, it just feels very hierarchical. It feels very old-fashioned. It doesn't feel very agile. We've got lots of cross-functional teams that work together based on what they know and what they can contribute to a project, and yet we go back to the old stakeholder analysis models, which are very much based on job titles and position in the company, and it just doesn't align. I think people just want messages that meet their personalities, their own preferences based on what their knowledge is, what they're trying to get done, what their objectives are. So I think we have to ask ourselves different questions these days, not job title, not position in company, but what's that person trying to achieve? What do they know? How do I get my message to them?
Okay. No, interesting. Something I'd be interested to hear from yourself, Mel, is with organisations now going more down that outcome-based model, as a change professional going into a business for the first time to essentially scope out some work or pitch for some work, how do change managers set themselves up for success initially within that whole model as what the deliverables should look like, the outcomes, with it being so ambiguous sometimes and also things just being discovered as you hit the ground? What would be your advice to individuals out there to kind of set themselves up for success, but also setting the right expectations with the client? Like, what's your advice there?
I think the biggest issue, and we're not doing enough of it in change, is we need to realise that we are there to help the organisation realise benefits. So we have to get into the conversation which says, what would good look like for you? And what kind of benefits are we expecting? We are helping to implement something, whether it's a new organisation structure, whether it's adopting a new way of working. So it might be a new operating model, or it could be that we're going to an enterprise-wide platform. But you have to ask, okay, well, that was the thing that we're going to get implemented. But what's the result of that? Are we looking for financial gain? Are we looking for efficiencies? Are we looking to streamline what we do? And if so, does that mean we're moving people to do more value-added tasks? So what does good look like? Having that conversation and then being prepared to do the really difficult thing, which is translate that into, okay, how can I measure that? I was doing some work with a client last week where they're basically saying that as a result of the systems they're bringing in, they're asking their staff to move from a world of data input and measuring them against how quickly they can input transactions and how accurately they can input transactions to being much more about the insight that data actually comes up with, and going back to the customer and having really deep conversations and creating a sticky customer relationship, great satisfaction on the behalf of the customer who comes back and buys more and more. So these people are moving from people who were sort of managing the transactions through to actually a lot of the data is automatically processed now. I can talk to my customer more. So I said to the client, what does that look like? So we've got more confident staff who spend more time speaking to customers. We should see, but it's a lagging indicator, that over the next 6 to 12 months that customers are doing more repeat business. And they were going, yes, all of those things. And all the time I'm talking about it, I'm thinking, how can I measure it? And a measure ultimately comes down to what difference will I see? So you have to, I think, break that down into what will I see if a staff member's more confident. That means that they ask for less help. Probably the elapsed time for getting something done shortens. They advise their team members more. They're taking part in more conversations about how to help others do things. That would be confident, would it? Okay, then how am I going to measure those things? Yeah. So I think there's a whole skill set about how we ask, what does good look like? Defining acceptance criteria before we start work. In other words, you'll accept my work because it meets these criteria. I should know what they are before I start. And how do I then prove that I've met those criteria? What measures can I put in front of you? So I think we really need to focus on keep the end in mind. Go to the end of your successful contract. You've been there a year. Imagine what you would have delivered. Imagine what you'd be proud of. And then work back from that and go, right, that's what I'm going to deliver.
Having experienced many interview processes and sat in on a few interviews with change practitioners, but I don't think enough people do that. They don't set expectations, clearly articulate what they're going in there to do, probably even speaking about some of the challenges they're likely to face. They just go through a normal interview process, answer the client's questions, but don't really drive that conversation. I think that's a part of what I do, is to really help coach them on that conversation and how that should flow. Mm-hmm. And I think if more change people were doing that, or more people in general within their process, within their interview process, I think there would be a lot more success throughout that journey and that contract itself, and there won't be many situations where you're 3 months into a contract and the client turns around and says, what's happening here? Like, is this change management? Is this what I should have expected? There's a few questions that are obviously negative rather than positive, and I think going back to what you've just said, I think that will really help gear people up for the right contracts and obviously the right journey when they're on the ground.
Well, I think that people don't do it in terms of change, because what we're dealing with is my job is trying to persuade people to give up their old way of working and all of the comforting routine about those habits, because they know how that system works and they know how that process works, and to take a risk, take a leap of faith that they'll be able to be successful in this new way of working. So we know change is incredibly risky. How we do it is we influence, we motivate, we persuade. And actually the success that we have is when somebody in their head decides to go, okay, I'll try that out then. How you measure that is incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And that's why I think so many people in our profession shy away from it. And what you get in an interview is you get people telling you how busy they're going to be. They tell you all the activities they're going to do, but they won't talk about what the outcome, what the results of that activity will be. And I think that is where we have a big disconnect, because what we've got is people doing a lot, but they're not able to produce any kind of results to senior leaders to say, this is the evidence that what I'm doing is working. And I also have a view that if we start with the end in mind, and if we're very clear about what those measures look like, then we keep that close to our own hearts and we check in with ourselves. For example, I might be trying to persuade a team to start using a new system and to abandon a lot of the old paperwork, a lot of the old processes. What is it that I'm seeing? You could argue, well, everyone's logged onto the system every morning. Yeah, but they might also still be copying and pasting a lot of data to Excel, and they might still be working in the old ways, but paying sort of lip service to the new system. So what would be the measures that would show me that they have been successfully persuaded? And so there's a lot of intangibles that we need to turn into tangible measures. In that example, it might well be that we're seeing innovation, that we have the original system set up, but now people are making suggestions about how they can do it even better, how they can tweak things. We know that when people are using things, that we then tend to innovate on them. If they're still playing with their Excel spreadsheets, they're not really using the new system. You won't have any of that chatter. You won't have any of those examples. So you think, actually, that is something we could look for. We could ask in team meetings. We could get some kind of feedback about whether or not there are requests for more changes. We can see that energy. It's not impossible to notice. I need to put in my change plan, these are the things we should be looking out for. These are the cues. What we should notice would indicate that the change is going well, or actually people are avoiding the change and ignoring it. I think that's a whole world that we need to do a lot more on.
On the survey, because I know that you're kicking one off again in September, can you just do a bit of an intro to that for anyone that's watching, just to give a bit of insight, what's happening there, when it's happening, why it's happening, and some learnings from the previous one that you did?
Yeah, I think that what we do is we get people to register for the survey, and we'll make those details available. Anyone who is interested in how are we doing in terms of our ability to manage change in this organisation. So you're within an organisation, and if you're a consultant, but you're working within an organisation, answer on their behalf. And it's just challenging you to think, what are we good at in terms of, are we good in terms of our approach? Do we have a change management office? Do we have a process that we follow? Do we have agility? Are we good at aligning what we do to our strategic objectives? Have we got the right people? Are we training people? Are we investing people? Are we measuring the benefits of our changes? All of those things, the questions are across 6 sort of areas, and they are each of those is thought-provoking in terms of making you think, are we doing this well or not? And it's anybody. I haven't just gone out on a certain job title and invited people, because one of the things that's always interesting about change is that I think as a community, we have such a wide range of job titles. You must hire for them all the time. I mean, sometimes I've got a director of transformation. Sometimes I've got a head of change management. Sometimes I've got a head of practice change. Yeah. I was out to dinner last night with somebody who is the head of strategy and transformation, which is becoming a more common job title now. So I couldn't limit myself to any particular job title. So what I've said is fill in the survey if you have a passion and an interest, and you can see across your organisation maybe how you think things are going in terms of managing change. Yeah. So I've kept it wide open because it's people who want to go, how are we doing? And I would like to get access to that data.
And what is your mission with that survey? What are you hoping to achieve once you've got that data, and what will be kind of the next step to make sure that's making a big difference in the world of change delivery and strategy and advisory and everything else that encompasses that world?
Since I started the survey, I think what has made the greatest difference, not just to me, but I know a lot of the respondents to the survey have done the same thing. They've taken the data, and I produce a big report when the survey closes, and I use all of my years of experience to try to identify what I see as the common themes and the trends, and I compare. So I give you a story. You've got the data, you've got the statistics you can quote, and I know a lot of us go into the C-suite, and it enables us to talk about the value of change management, what it's doing for us, but also where the gaps are in our own organisations and how we should fix them. And I know that the most important thing is that by being able to have that evidence-driven conversation, I get more attention from the C-suite, because I think as a profession, we still have an issue that we are not a role that's on the board. Mm-hmm. We are often reporting through to, it might be the head of IT, it could be the head of operations, or sometimes the strategy office, but often we are not on the board. And there is still a lot of confusion about what change professionals do and what value they add. So I've done this because I want to have the answers myself for those difficult board conversations. And I know that all the respondents have actually been doing the same thing. They've used the figures to, if you like, advocate for their work.
Yeah. I rarely see it, but I have seen it a couple of times where you've got a chief transformation officer, but it's very, very rare. Yes. Again, transformation doesn't mean that person has a core focus on change management. Are you hoping to see that, where change management does have a place on the board? You've got a chief change management officer, or have you seen it? Is it something that you feel is getting there, or?
I see it very, very rarely. And I think it is incredibly helpful whenever you've got a board position. It does give a focus to that entire profession. We don't have the head of project management on the board for organisations, and I don't think we'll probably see the head of change management on there. But I think that there is something in the strategy world which says, well, if we're talking about our overall direction and strategy, how we deliver on that, both the tangible deliverables, which is all of the project side, and the realisation of the benefits piece, which is all of the change side, I think there is clearly a role on the board for how we're doing everything today, the ops, the finance, the risk, and also how we're building for the future, which is much more around that strategy and transformation function. looking at some of the big global surveys from the big consultancies, we can see that innovation has actually overtaken operational efficiency on the CEO surveys as the top piece. So do I see something in the world of change heading more towards a board role? Yes. Some organisations, as you said, director of transformation, sometimes wrapped in as director of strategy and transformation, or director of innovation. I don't think it will be change management. I think it will be much more around, are we able to do more than we could do before? Are we having new ideas?
Yeah. I see it a lot where the CHRO or the CIO has a strong presence within change. Like they're the sponsor, they're driving that through the organisation. So that's obviously a good sign that those organisations and those individuals are taking that seriously. And now I'm seeing that more organisations are setting up change management functions, so CEOs, COEs, or change management offices.
Yes.
But the challenge that I've seen with a lot of those functions within businesses that they're part of a transformation budget, they don't really get much headcount. So you've got one individual who's, say, the change capability director or CMO lead, but they struggle to build an internal capability because of that. We've not been able to get that headcount, and because it's a transformation budget, they have to bring externals in, which then, contradicts you of actually building internal capability, because as much as external resource is important to help maybe build those frameworks or methodologies, having a permanent, team of people is quite crucial. Are you finding that more organisations are providing more headcount within that space, or are you still seeing a high external workforce?
There's still a high external workforce, but I am seeing a greater willingness to invest in the capability for change. And I was with an organisation yesterday that is building its team. It's got another 12 jobs out there now. It's building the team to be 60 plus within transformation. And they are drawing both externally and internally. I think it comes back to my previous point, which is that if you are in that centre of excellence for change, and whatever the job title there is, because sometimes it could be within the portfolio office as well, that we should build it with line managers. We should, if we want to build a huge capacity for change, we cannot just sit within a change office. So we have to keep building within line managers, supervisors, team leaders, the ability for them to cope and thrive during change, and give them all the techniques and all of the support and ideas for them to be able to do that to their teams. So I think there's two things. Change, hiring for change staff is becoming much more of the norm now.
Yeah.
Couple that with, and we're also trying to upskill lots of other people across the business. One of the things I say to all of the people that I train and coach is that the joke was, when I first came into investment banking, and as I said, I wanted a career there where I was very, very ambitious. And it was very clear to me that you couldn't get into the boardroom without good financial experience. That was the first sort of 10, 15 years of my career. The next sort of 10 years was you couldn't get into the boardroom unless you really good on information technology. But the last 5 to 8 years, the joke's moved to you can't really get into the boardroom unless you have strong transformational skills. Because the one thing we can absolutely guarantee is that whatever organisation you're in, you are going to be responsible for transformation as part of your role. And so the leaders that I currently train, I've just done a big leadership program in the Middle East. They are identified as the future leaders, and the first thing they are learning is the transformation and change management skills.
Yeah.
And I think that is, if you've got any ambitions to move into senior leadership positions, your ability to manage change and to keep changing how work is done in an organisation, that's going to be the key thing.
What's your experience with global change teams in the sense of where is the capability mostly situated? I find that a lot of those change teams are sat in the US, in the UK, Australia. example, Germany, do you find that there's a lot of change management professionals situated in countries like Germany, where there's obviously large organisations that are obviously going through transformation? Is that something that you're seeing, or?
There are certain pockets of the world where there isn't much in the world of change. I would certainly agree. Canada and the US, the UK, Australia is where a lot of the global change teams are based. Across Europe, I would say that Germany, the Netherlands, the Nordic countries are strong on change, less so in the southern Mediterranean countries. I think one of the things that interests me about the global change roles is that we still need to reflect on the fact that there are country cultures that play a part in how we manage change. And so it doesn't matter where you're based. I think you just have to be willing to flex how you're going to do change. I can't name the brand, but we sat down and had a conversation a few months ago about the fact that they would like to be quite methodologically driven, that they had a life cycle model and they wanted to use it. But that did not work in some of their parts of the world. But it did work very well in the US and the UK. People were willing to move towards it. But in other parts of the world, people felt that it was far too deterministic and that they were being driven and directed to what to do. So I think from a global perspective, certainly those countries that are running the show, when I'm doing the global survey, it's really interesting that I struggle to get much representation around the Far East and India because those change management roles are held all by consultancies and not internal change teams. It is starkly noticeable when I'm inviting people to take part in the survey that those roles, there just aren't that many people doing those roles.
Yeah. I've been in business transformation recruiting now for 8 years, and I've definitely seen the demand for change increase massively, actually, over the last 3 to 5 years. But not only with external contractors or internal capability where they're looking to resource those people permanently, but the big four consultancies, the boutiques, they're all building up those change management functions. So obviously you can see the demand is high. We are still seeing that there's a huge spend happening with those big consultancies. Obviously, crazy money being spent. Do you find that that's another driving force for organisations to build up that capability internally because of it being cost effective? Or is it because they see also a difference in building that capability within their own culture and the way that they want to operate change and drive change within their organisation?
I think there's no getting around it. External consultancies can be great for jump-starting something. But if you're building that capability in-house, it is part of your culture. And I think because change is something where I might be nudging people to work in new ways throughout my day, but if I have that capability and I work for the organisation, you're going to find that that's something that I'm constantly putting out there, and it's for the benefit of the whole organisation. If I'm bringing in external consultants, it's for a specific transformation, and they will be gone at the end of that transformation. So I don't think it's just cost. I think it's much more around building the in-house capability gives you a capacity that you cannot get from external hiring.
Allows you to focus more on the human side, right?
Absolutely, and that's what change is all about.
Mel, can you share a failure or a setback that you feel defined your career?
I think I'm thinking of one particularly. It was about 20 years ago, and it was all about change, in that I was really struggling. I was working on a particular project, which was to restructure an investment bank, bringing a lot of jobs from New York back into London. And the reason I was struggling is because I didn't really believe in the change. It was a political decision. The director involved hated the guy in New York and was basically taking all of his staff and all of his credibility off him and moving it all back to London. And I just didn't believe in it. And it was a real learning point because it was my job to make it happen. And so I had to dig deep and find what was my motivation at that time. And so it was all about finding those personal benefits that enabled me to actually put across some kind of belief that we were doing something useful. And I think that was a defining moment in my career as well, because it made me think this is all about motivation. And so from that, I started to study much more into intrinsic motivation, what gets us up in the morning, what makes us want to do something. And that led me into the School of Positive Psychology, which led me into neuroscience. But I always think about it. I actually walked past that street this morning because I remember walking along that street to that particular office with a feeling of dread every morning, because I just thought, what am I doing with my time? Why am I wasting my time? So finding the benefits for me, which were about, well, you are doing something difficult, so that will stretch you. You're working with different people, so you'll build your network. You're getting paid, so you'll pay your mortgage. There were all of those benefits in there that I had to dig deep and go, okay, this is why I've got up this morning. But that really did lead me into a whole world of much more into behavioural change, I think. Yeah. So although it was a really horrible 9 months, it paid dividends throughout the rest of my career.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Obviously, you're very passionate about what you do, and you're doing everything you can to elevate the change profession, which then draws me onto the Change Awards, another initiative that's really helping elevate that profession and putting it in the limelight.
It's an opportunity to for people to celebrate their achievements. And the application process is so straightforward. It's one of the things that they've worked really hard to do, is to make it as easy as possible without, thousands of pages of forms to fill in, to just share a success. So I encourage everybody to apply to the Change Awards. I was at dinner last night with somebody who I said, get all of your team to apply, because they've got stories to tell. They are working on a difficult change, and they are having successes in terms of turning things around, getting their stakeholders engaged. Just share your story. That's all that we ask. As judges, we have a whole series of criteria. So we've done the what does good look like, and we evaluate against all of those criteria. It's anonymised. I've no idea who the applications are for, and I just work through all of the applications for the category that I'm judging. I tend to do that in one big heap, so that I look at all of them in exactly the same way in the same session. So last year, I think I actually sat down for 4.5 hours straight and did my entire category. Wow. And evaluated, because that felt like the fairest way to do it to me, to be honest. And it's great to hear all those success stories and to celebrate those things. And the awards ceremony itself, I think everybody said how wonderful it was. All of the applicants were there, not just the winners, obviously. And it was great to meet people in your network, build your network. The amount of talking and sharing of stories and making of friends, that was fantastic. Yeah. I'm a big supporter of this. Yeah,
it was incredible, the energy in that room on that day. I mean, I've been to many networking events and also been to a lot of events within the world of transformation. And I'd have to say that event had more energy than I've experienced in any other event.
Yeah.
I think it was just because it gave everyone an opportunity to celebrate change, and they don't really have the opportunity to do that. And you just had so many people that may have not even been to an event like that before, and they're just meeting other change people, and just gave them the opportunity to be a big part of that world, and know that it's a lot bigger than just their silo and what they're doing within their organisation.
Well, I said to people who were applying, even if they didn't win, you can always put on your LinkedIn profile, I'm an applicant of the Change Awards.
Yeah, of course.
You don't have to say you're a winner of the Change Awards. But again, it's all about building professionalism, getting credibility, getting recognition for what we do. So I think that is going to be one of the sort of driving forces of people's career, is that, they get certifications, they get applications for professional bodies, they win awards, they go to those kinds of things. It's all about being proud of being an expert in your field, really.
Yeah. And I hope that encourages more people to apply this year, because what I found, obviously it was a new initiative, so people are seeing this for the first time. There were a few people a bit shy about applying and thinking, I don't know if I've done enough, but there's so many amazing things that people have done that they sometimes don't shout out about, and I think this is a good opportunity to do that.
I did put on some of my social media about overcoming the imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And everybody thinking, oh, everybody else is going to be so much better than me. Well, as I said, the judging is anonymised. So write down about your own experience and just put it in there. You've got nothing to lose and everything to gain.
Okay, thank you, Mel. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate you coming over and speaking to us about all the amazing things that you do within the community of change. And I think this is going to really help encourage people not only to move into the profession, but to find new ways of working within that world and obviously being resilient and making sure that they're doing all the great things for their clients. So thank you so much.
It's a brilliant job. It's a brilliant profession to be a part of, and I want to encourage more people to join, and for those that are already doing this job to feel really proud of what they do every day.
Thank you.